Welcome to Legendary Physique. We had such a good response from our interviews with Jerry Brainum, we decided to do one a month. Basically, it'll consist of talking about his latest newsletter and what his readers will be able to access in that newsletter, all the great research and stuff. Okay, it's good to see you again, Jerry.
Same here, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I really liked your December newsletter, especially the one about the best time to train.
Right.
It sort of was confirmation that I was doing the right thing.
Right.
I never understood, like you talked about your time trying to train like 5 or 4 in the morning. It just didn't work for you. It works for Bill Pearl, evidently.
Right.
But 10 and 2 is the best time for me to train. It seemed to conform with your article pretty much.
Right. Well, basically, it has to do with what they call chronobiology. In other words, your body has certain daily rhythms, circadian rhythms.
Right.
And what they found in research is that certain things in the body peak at certain times, like endurance, strength, and all that. And generally speaking, the really very early morning workouts, like Bill Pearl likes to do at 4 o'clock in the morning, your body is, as you might suspect, is still asleep. And in the article I talked about, you might remember I talked about this anecdote when a guy named Billy Markakis at the original Golds, he tried to talk me into training. At that time, Golds was opening up at 6 in the morning. This is in the 70s. He talked me into it. He says, give it time, your body will get used to it.
I never could.
I gave it 2 weeks, Richard, and I'm telling you, just like he said, my mind seemed to wake up after about the first 10 minutes, but my body never did. I remember doing curls. I felt nothing, no pump. It's like I was there, but I wasn't there. So I
thought that was a great article, and I think anybody that's not getting your newsletter really missed something not seeing it. So what do you got for January? I'm really excited about what's coming out in January because I know you're always reading in nutrition, training, and all over the place, and you always have a variety of topics in your newsletter, and I always get a great surprise every month. I just can't wait till the next issue.
Well, Richard, see, my philosophy with this newsletter is I don't write for myself. I try and write what I think people want to read. I want to write practical information that people will benefit from. So I search around it, and I try and also write a little bit of kind of off the road stuff. I don't want to write about how to train arms, and I mean that's interesting stuff. And if I find a good science study related to it, I don't have a problem writing with it. But it's kind of covered all over the place. I mean, there's videos, all that. So I try and answer questions that people might have in mind. Now, to give you an example, I don't know if you remember, there was a controversy about a year or so ago where, did you see the report? It was in the popular media about how eating red meat will give you cardiovascular disease.
Oh, yeah.
What the media reports basically said was, they thought for years it was the saturated fat content of meat that caused cardiovascular disease or promoted cardiovascular disease. Then they came out with a different idea. Now they said they did some tests. They found that it was, you've probably heard of a nutrient or a supplement called L-carnitine. I don't know if you ever used it.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of bodybuilders and fitness people, they favorite because it's involved in fat metabolism. Basically, carnitine is made from amino acids, lysine and methionine. It's needed to basically ferry fatty acids into the mitochondria where the fat is actually burned in a process called beta oxidation. But here's the point. The point is that meat is actually high in carnitine, especially red meat. In fact, the word carnitine comes from the Latin word carnis, which means meat. It was named by Russian scientists who discovered it in, I think it was ox or beef, I can't remember, way back in 1900. But here's the point, again, I know I'm veering a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make is that this study said that carnitine, and a previous study also indicted choline, which is another, as you know, lipotrophic. We all used it in the 70s. As I remember Larry Scott, everybody talking about choline and acetol. And they said that choline does the same thing. Without going into detail, which I talk about in my article, it has to do with the transformation of choline and carnitine through intestinal bacterial action into this substance called TMAO. So here's the reason I wrote the article, because I still see, to this day, I go on the internet, I see these blogs and these articles warning. They were written by scientists, no less, scientists, not written by these conspiracy theorists. These are scientists. They're telling bodybuilders and athletes, do not take choline or carnitine supplements. It'll kill you. It'll give you cardiovascular disease. So I investigated that, and I wrote this article, which will tell you the absolute truth. about whether or not it causes cardiovascular disease. It gives you also a couple of options if you are worried about that, where you will never have to worry about it again. So that's the first article.
Okay, that's great. Sounds great. Can't wait.
Okay, the next article is a question I frequently get, Richard. I don't know if you get this, is, whey protein is the most popular protein. We both know that for good reason. A good whey, when somebody asks me, what's the best protein supplement, without hesitation, I say whey protein isolates. There's a lot of reasons for it, but, let's just say that that's the best. But a lot of people, for some reason, cannot handle whey protein. A lot of times people say they get bloated from it. A lot of people can't have an allergy to the actual milk protein that's in whey. So they say, Jerry, what are some alternative protein supplement sources? I mean, I see they're coming out with stuff like pea protein and hemp protein and wheat protein and rice protein. I mean, are these any good? I mean, I want to build some muscle, but I don't want to waste my money on crappy products that aren't going to really do anything. I mean, I've heard that plant proteins just really aren't usable by the body that well. I mean, and there's a certain amount of truth to that. They're not as good as animal proteins because of the difference in essential amino acid content. So this article deals with the question: are these alternative protein supplements? And I focus on two of them: rice and pea protein. Are they really going to help you build muscle? And what's the best way to use them? And what's the features of the product? So that's another article in there, right?
Sounds great.
And then this one's really interesting. I mean, a lot of times people will work out, they're doing everything right. I don't know if you ever experienced this yourself. I mean, I have, not too often, but I've heard of others doing it, where they're just not feeling well. It's like they have like stomach problems. They kind of feel sick and they don't know why. I actually discovered the reason for that. Believe it or not, it relates to exercise intensity level. It's a very, very complex subject, extremely complex. It has to do with intestinal permeability of what they call tight junction cells. I know this, it's kind of a lot of anatomy about, but what I did is I simplified it and I explained how training in a certain manner will not only encourage or promote a feeling of sickness, but it'll also encourage systemic inflammation, which is a very bad thing because that's associated with a lot of degenerative diseases, including cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and so on and so forth. So basically, I kind of discussed this for the first time anywhere, this kind of weird effect of overtraining that nobody ever talked about. So that's another thing.
Yeah, that was my first guess, was overtraining, right?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely related to overtraining.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I can't wait to read that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then, vitamin, the next article, vitamin D, as you know, that's a hot topic. I mean, a couple of years ago, when I first started studying nutrition 53 years ago, but the only thing vitamin D was thought about was in relation to calcium absorption. They knew that if you gave, for example, children who lacked vitamin D got a disease called rickets, which is a softening of the bones.
That's all they told you in elementary school or whatever when they talked about vitamins.
Exactly. And adults, the adult form is called osteomalacia. And they both basically involve the softening of the bones because the bones are not absorbing enough calcium because of a lack of vitamin D, right? They discovered vitamin D in cod liver oil, and then boom, the rickets ended basically in the United States, although you still see it, in third world countries. In fact, a famous person who we both knew who had rickets as a child, and if you look at photos of him, you'll see it, is Franco Colombo. He has that slight bow-legged look.
I didn't know that was the cause. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I learned about it from Arnold because I wrote in one of my articles how Franco had this weird pectoral development, this weird cut. And Arnold told me way back when in 1970, he told me that he thought it was hilarious that all the bodybuilders wanted to know how Franco got that great definition in his chest. And in fact, it was from a chest malformation that Franco had due to childhood rickets, which I thought that was really funny. But anyway, here's the point though. There's a lot of things to write about vitamin D. I wanted to narrow it down because it's a lot of confusion arises about how much vitamin D do we need. I mean, the Institute of Medicine, which is this big science governing body made up of some of the most eminent scientists in the world, they came up with a figure of 600 units a day. And yet we know that it takes 2,000 units just to raise your D level to the minimal acceptable amount, which is 30 nanograms per deciliter, right? So, you go back and forth. The endocrinology says one figure, the Institute, it's confusing people. I found some.
Well, wasn't it in the past they were basically trying to set the level at just that you could avoid rickets instead of how about being healthy?
Well, in fact, the 400 units that they add to milk, that is enough to prevent rickets. But it's not going to, you see, in those days, they didn't know what vitamin D did. Vitamin D does a lot more than just absorb calcium. It turns on 1,000 different genes in the body, and there's vitamin D cell receptors everywhere, including your muscles, including the area of your testes that produces testosterone in your brain. They're all over the place. Vitamin D is a hormone. The vitamin D we take in supplement form is just a prohormone. It's converted in the body into the hormonal form. That's the active form. So
I know we talked before about how 75% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. So this is an important article.
Very important. In fact, in the article I mentioned a figure. They now know that 88.1% of the world population is deficient in D. And you know what's pathetic about that, Richard? Well, not really pathetic. You know, vitamin D is the only nutrient I know of that's free. You go out in the sun and you expose your 5% of your body to the sun for 15 to 20 minutes, your body makes 20,000 units of vitamin D from the ultraviolet ray conversion of cholesterol in the skin. But the sun has to be in the right part of the sky, and there has to be enough sun. Obviously, in northern latitudes in the winter, it's not going to happen. You need to take a vitamin D supplement, right? So my article, basically, I came across some recent research. It was based on they analyzed 36 different studies where they gave different recommendations, and they came up with a range of vitamin D, and I give the exact amounts, by the way. I'm not going to give this and that. I give the exact amounts. A range of vitamin D, and this is for lean people, obese people, and older people, the three main categories. I give a range which will bring your vitamin D to optimal levels of 50 nanograms per deciliter. That's the optimal for health, but it will not bring it too high where you're going to have problems with calcium deposition, in your arteries and in your soft tissues. That is a problem with too much vitamin D. But in the article, get this, I give a nutritional antidote to that, where people who take vitamin D, if they take this other nutrient, they'll never have to worry about calcium deposits caused by vitamin D. Never. It's completely obliterated if you take the very simple other natural nutrient.
Great. Well, everybody that subscribes to your newsletter is going to have a treat with this one.
Oh,
like they always do. But that sounds like you got some really good ones.
Oh, yeah.